Hey there, folks. Chris Holman here, Nine Line Ministries. I decided to do this video to have a little discussion with you and also to ask for your prayers. So, though I don't have all of this set up completely yet the way that it's going to be, I was still going to do a sermon back on my regular schedule tomorrow. Because of some things that have happened in my personal life this weekend, I'm not going to be able to. God willing, I'll be back on my regular schedule next Sunday. And there will be still some occasional live chats like I've been doing. I would like to be able to do them from the backyard like I had been. I can if I record it like I'm doing with this one. So maybe I could do some of them. But as a live stream, it would have to be here to be able to do live. So I've spoken a lot recently, and I've spoken a lot about this really for quite a long time, where we can only change what we can change, and the things we can't, just give it to God, right? We can't control anyone but ourselves. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? There are circumstances in our lives that can challenge this when when you're dealing with someone that you love, right? So, if a family member, whether it be a parent, a sibling, a child, a spouse, significant other, someone that you love, when there is, whether it be because of mental illness or whether for whatever reason they just do not recognize their behavior and they do not recognize how they're hurting you and hurting others, and when they shift blame onto you and onto others and project themselves onto others. What do you do with that? Now, this is someone you love. This is someone you love. Like I said, it could be a parent, a sibling, spouse, a child. Someone that you love. Well, this brings in another thing that I've talked about many times, which is the 3 types of forgiveness. And that being first kind of forgiveness, someone who has wronged you, who admits their fault, who sincerely apologizes and changes their behavior. You forgive them and you move on. Nothing's changed. Someone who has hurt you in some way, they apologize with sincerity, but for whatever reason their behavior doesn't change. You forgive them, but you give them distance. You don't allow them into that inner circle at a distance. Now, if this is someone who's not a family member, an acquaintance, you can go ahead and go to the 3rd kind of forgiveness. But that's the 2nd kind of forgiveness, where their behavior is not going to change. They may sincerely apologize and intend to change, but that behavior doesn't change. So they're still in your life. You forgive them, but you have to distance yourself from them. Then the third kind of forgiveness is someone who does not recognize they've hurt you, but they don't recognize that they are at fault. They don't apologize and have no intention of changing. Then you have to forgive them. You have to forgive them. Jesus tells us we have to forgive to be forgiven. Keep that in mind. You have to forgive to be forgiven. And so you then forgive them, but you have to cut them out of your life. And that becomes extremely difficult to do when it is someone that you love. If it's a friend, it's hard, but it's always hard to do this. But it's not as hard when it's a friend or an acquaintance or someone you know or someone at church, right? But when it's someone you love, a family member, or a spouse, a significant other, it becomes a very difficult thing to do. Now, one thing about me, about my personality, the kind of man that I am, I don't allow myself to be a doormat for others. I don't. But at the same time, I forgive actually rather easily. I don't really hold grudges. Even for serious things, I forgive easily. And sometimes I give second chances when I probably shouldn't. Now, it's very rare for me to give a third chance or a fourth chance. Extremely rare. But a second chance to show to others grace. Right? God has given us grace. So then I freely just give that grace to others. I forgive and I give those second chances. What's that old saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. The thing is when I do that, when I do give someone a second chance, and look, many times I've given people a second chance. I'd say more often than not. When I give them that second chance, they recognize it, and things are addressed and things are fixed, and whatever was wrong is in our relationship is repaired, and we move forward, and we're good. Sometimes it's not. And that's always the risk you take when you give someone that second chance. That the behavior won't change or that it'll get worse. Now, it's much less likely that the behavior will change. In fact, it's rather unlikely that it will ever change when the root cause of it is a mental illness, particularly if the person refuses to recognize that it even exists. There are many different mental illnesses that manifest in that way, where to the sufferer of that mental illness, it's always someone else, right? It's always someone else's problem, someone else's fault. They never do anything wrong. It's always someone else, someone else, someone else. Their behavior, nothing's wrong with their behavior. Someone who will not recognize that they've done anything wrong, well, they're never going to change. And then you're left with only one option, which is that third kind of forgiveness. To forgive them. I forgive you, I love you, I forgive you, but I have to let you go. You know, I'm a giver. I really am. And when I mean as a giver, there's in life, of course, people are much more complicated than this, but you can really simplify people down to givers and takers. Again, people are much more complicated than that, but you can simplify it all the way down to givers and takers. And I'm a giver. I give. And what I mean by that is it's not just financially or materially, but emotionally. Like I give freely, I love freely, I have a big heart. And I don't give my heart to everyone, but when I give it, they have all of me. You know? I don't let everybody into my inner circle, into my life, but those that I do, they have me and they have all of me, and I give emotionally, my time, I give that. I'm patient. I'm slow to anger most times. Now, I've talked about this before where I've had a problem with anger in my past. Anyone who has had, well, I don't think it needs to be even anyone who's had problems with anger, but just anyone in particular, if you're constantly being yelled at, right? If someone is always accusing you of things or applying the worst of motivations, if they're throwing tantrums and getting angry and mad and yelling over nothing, eventually that person is going to get frustrated and just, and lose their temper. I mean, no one is perfect, right? Well, if you're in a situation like that, whether you've had a problem with anger or not, that's a toxic, chaotic, and toxic situation to be in. That's a dysfunctional and abusive situation to be in. Now, what's sad is in today's society, the man can be the victim in the situation, who's constantly being yelled at, constantly being accused of things, who is being controlled and who has to walk around on eggshells because they don't know if that other person is going to lose their cool or blow their top over who knows what. But the moment that man raises his voice, she's the victim. The man need only raise his voice. And I would have to say that if, for anyone, you, me, anyone, if you find yourself in a situation where you're constantly being yelled at for nothing, over little to nothing. It might even be something, but it's just little. It's things that most people would just go, all right, and just carry on with it. Like it's not worth getting angry over because it's, you know what I mean? Like it's more of an annoyance, things that other people might just find annoying, and instead they're raging. Man, you just got to get away from that, you know? Just got to get away from it. You know, as Christians, I've said this before, we're supposed to, to edify, which means one another, which means to encourage or lift each other up. to help one another. But at some point, when do you throw up your hands and say, I've given so much to help, and you're not listening, or now you're taking it out on me. Now you've turned on me. At some point, you've got to just walk away. And you're not. Of course, you don't just walk away. That is that moment where you give it to God. So right here is a perfect example of a situation. Now, I'm not getting into too details about who, what, where, their relationship to me, or what this is. I'm just really speaking hypotheticals in most of this, just situations. But this right here is a perfect example of where recognizing what you can change and what you can't, giving it to God. You can't change other people, that you can't help them if they don't want to be helped. If they're not willing to change, you have to give it to God. And the sad part is when you try to help people, at times the person that's trying to help them becomes the focus of their ire, right? I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen it. I've experienced it. At what point do you just step away? At what point do you just say, God, I give it to you. I'm done. The threshold is different for many people. Some people, they'll do it first, like right away almost. Others, they'll put in that effort. They'll give those second chances and those third chances and those fourth chances. Some people never give up. In a way, it's admirable to those, particularly if it's a family member, say a child. They never give up on their child. They never give up on their child. But at what point does your help become enabling the behavior? You know? Life on this earth is short. I've said this before, but it's been a very long time. That life on this earth is short, and that you only have so much time. Your time is finite. That you shouldn't waste that finite time on people that don't appreciate you, who don't love you and see you for the person that you are. You know, this too shall pass, what I'm going through right now. In fact, it's mostly over. I've had to do exactly what I'm talking about. I've had to do that today. You know, people come into our lives for different reasons. And sometimes it's because there's a lesson to be learned from that. Sometimes people come into our lives because the devil is trying to trip us up. But sometimes there is indeed a lesson to be learned. Now, by talking about mental illness, in this country there's an epidemic of mental illness. And I believe that there are many, many causes for this. Now, I'm not talking about psychosis. That's not what I'm not talking about psychoses, whatever, how you would call it and say it in plural, but I mean mental illness. Things like bipolar, depression, anxiety, those types of things. I saw a statistic once that I think it was over 50%, it might have even been more like 60% of all Americans will be on a psychiatric medication at some point in their life. That's crazy, right? The percentage of Americans that at any one time that are on psychiatric medication, I think, was somewhere around a third of the country, like 33%, somewhere around there. Like, it's a lot. Why is that? Well, I believe one cause is a breakdown of the family. Single motherhood creates a generational cycle of poverty, but it also brings about, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, a generational cycle of trauma. See, someone who was abused as a child is very likely to develop mental illnesses like depression, anxiety, bipolar. In fact, childhood trauma is, I believe, a very big cause for things of those things. Now, bipolar can also be, for instance, can be just inherited. You had a good childhood, but you're bipolar, right? For the breakdown of the American family, the urbanization of America, I believe, is a big cause. And let me explain. So many Americans, I would say the majority, they may have a job, they may even have a career. They likely hate it, and they don't feel any purpose in their life. Human beings, particularly men, need to feel like they have a purpose in life. Now, for many women, having children gives them purpose. For men, it can be their career. It can be a hobby. It could be their work in charity. It could be any number of things. Having a greenhouse in the backyard. Many things in life can give us purpose. Because of the rapid urbanization of America in the last half a century or more, it's led to a tremendous loss of purpose for so many people. That leads to depression. Is a cause for. I mean, imagine you're a young man, mid to late 20s. You went to college. You're in a tremendous amount of debt now. You have a job that seems dead end. It may or may not be a dead end job. You're in a cubicle for 8 hours a day. Get off work. You go home. You eat a TV dinner, watch TV, go to bed, wake up, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. No purpose and loneliness. And that is a reality in America for a large number of men in that very same age group I'm just talking about. You know, if you go back 50 years, 60 years, most couples were married, if not in their late teens, in their very early 20s. Men by the age of 21, 22, they were responsible. They had a job. They likely had one, maybe two children already. They were responsible. Now, it's not so common. Now, many of those same men are realizing later, maybe as young as 21 or 22 or 23 or 24 in their early 20s, they realize where they're at and where they want to be, and they make a change, and that's admirable. In fact, that's what I did. Made a change in my life. There's also many men that just never do. They end up in their 30s, maybe even their 40s, still living at home with their parents. They have no ambition in life. They have no family, never married. Maybe a relationship here or there, but nothing ever any serious, and they've never really left adolescence. And they're not happy. The state of society, the rejection of God, morality, the embrace of perversions, the destruction of the family unit. I'm not going to say it's one racial demographic or one economic demographic, because it's across the board, people. Some places it's worse than others, but it's across the board. Broken homes, fatherless homes, men that aren't really men. They never grew up. They're just adult boys. Women that never learned what it means to be feminine. In fact, they're told to reject it. They're taught to hate men for the simple just regular standard, just average masculine traits they're told are toxic. They hate men. People are lonely. People are hurting. People are being abused. People are traumatized in this country. And what society needs, what this country needs, what you need, what I need, what we all need is Jesus Christ. What we all need is to get back to God. The sermon I had planned, the sermon I'm working on, I was going to talk about sin from the societal standpoint, because there's a reason why God condemns certain things as sin. See, it's not because he just doesn't want you to do it. It's because he loves you and he knows what it will do to you. He knows what it will do to those that you love, what it will do to your family and your loved ones, your community. There's a reason why God condemns certain things as sinful. And our society has rejected God and morality and embraced perversions, is in complete opposition to the commandments of God in the way that we ought to live. And we're seeing the repercussions of that all around us, where those we love can be so traumatized from their past that they are damaged, that only God, the great physician, can heal. But even then, only if they themselves recognize it and reach out to him. So many people are hurting, they are traumatized, they are damaged because we, and I say we, not us and them, but we collectively, as a nation, as a society, we have rejected God. We have rejected his commandments. We have rejected his divine order. We have forgotten how to truly live. We have forgotten how to be men. We have forgotten how to be women. We have forgotten how to love. So many people have no respect for the sanctity of life. It's heartbreaking. Now, the true victims of murder are the family members of the slain. I want you to think about this. When there is murder, the person who was murdered, yes, they are a victim and they're gone. And any opportunity they would have had, if they had not found Jesus, those opportunities are gone. Only God has authority over life and death, and now someone has taken that authority upon themselves. But the true victims are those who loved them. Their parents, their siblings, their spouse, their children. They are the ones who continue to suffer. Their suffering continues on. There is a trauma there that can carry on. And that hurt can then, through the actions of the traumatized, can then traumatize others. It can lead to situations where someone is hesitant or incapable of trust or even love. We need to get back to God. As a society, as a nation, as a people. Be the change you want in the world. Clean out your own closet. You get right with God. You make those changes in your life. Love others as they ought to be loved, as you would want to be loved. Honor your father and mother. Do not lie and steal and cheat. Do not bear false witness upon others, making claims that are not true. Do not kill and assault others. Put God first. Have no other God but God. To love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Be that to the world. When others look upon you and they say, hey, this person has it all together, they're happy. They love others and others love them. They have such a good life. I want what they have. And when they talk to you and they say, what is it? What's the secret? And you can say, it's Jesus. I am forgiven. I am loved. I am known. I have peace. Be the change you want to see in the world. If each of us are that change, in a generation or two, maybe 3, our society can finally heal, can come together, can turn back to God. Look, the nation of Israel turned their back on God many times in the Old Testament. And when they did, God delivered them into the hands of their enemies. And when they repented and turned back to God, God delivered them and returned them back to their rightful place. So too can God do that to us on an individual basis, in our families, in our nations, and in society. We all collectively are to blame for allowing our society to get to where it is today, where so many people have been hurt, have been traumatized, have been victimized, where there is so much pain in the hearts of so many. That they live lives that are filled with continual pain and heartache and hardships, where there is mental illness that shouldn't be there. Where there are trust issues where there ought not be. An inability to love, or one who is without the knowledge of what true love, real love is. Because there are people who don't know how to be loved, how to accept love. There's no such thing as a utopia and a perfect society, and there will always be pain. But rest assured, when we reject God and embrace immorality and perversions, there will be so much pain, trauma, and hardships to count. And our societies will fall. This has gone somewhere where I didn't intend it to be. But I'm glad that I talked about this. I began with my own personal, what I'm going through right now, what I've had to do, the decisions I've had to make. And I'm making this video because I want, because this channel is a ministry, I want you to be able to take something from this on your personal lives, where you can see where this is coming from. When there is mental illness, why is there so much mental illness? Well, not completely, but for many reasons. I've already laid it out. If you've watched this far, I ask you to keep me in your prayers. Know that I'm okay, and I will get through this. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. But keep me in your prayers. Keep this ministry in your prayers. Know that life is never easy. Not for you, not for me. And we must be able to recognize what we cannot change and to give it to God. To forgive, but to know the kind of forgiveness to give, to know when we are to forgive and step back and just give them to God. Just give them to God. Let God work on their hearts. I have a lot of praying to do, a lot of soul searching to do. Some serious prayer and soul searching. Pray with me. Not just for me, but with me. Pray that with me that through the grace of God and the power of God, through Christ, that those around us that are hurting, that are suffering, are healed by the great physician, that souls begin to turn to Christ, that we can stop these generational cycles of pain and trauma, of abuse, that God will use us as His instrument to minister to others and to bring to them healing. Our God is a God of love. God bless.
Need to go back, 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 back to back. We need to go back, 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 back.